These are the final resting places of 30 baseball legends. Babe Ruth was buried after he died from throat cancer in August 1948 at age 53, with an estimated 75,000 people filing past his coffin at Yankee Stadium before his funeral mass at St. Patrick's Cathedral on Fifth Avenue and his burial at Gate of Heaven Cemetery in Hawthorne, New York, a Catholic cemetery in Westchester County, roughly 25 miles north of the stadium he made immortal. The man who hit 714 home runs and transformed baseball from a pitching contest into a power spectacle lies beneath a large granite monument that has become one of American sport's most visited pilgrimage sites, with fans leaving baseballs, bats, pennants, and handwritten notes throughout every baseball season. He ate too much, drank too much, played harder than anyone before or since, and remained the most recognizable athlete in American history for decades after his death. Lou Gehrig was buried after he died from amyotrophic lateral sclerosis in June 1941 at age 37, laid to rest at Kensico Cemetery in Valhalla, New York, all just 2 years after delivering his farewell speech at Yankee Stadium, in which he declared himself the luckiest man on the face of the earth, despite knowing the disease was already dismantling him from the inside. The first baseman who played 2,130 consecutive games for the New York Yankees is interred alongside his wife Eleanor, his grave a monument to both athletic excellence and to the particular dignity of a man who faced an unwinnable situation without self-pity. The disease that carried his name killed him 14 months after he retired, and the speech he gave on the day he said goodbye has been called the finest address in the history of American sport. Ty Cobb was buried after he died from heart disease, prostate cancer, and diabetes in July 1961 at age 74, laid to rest inside a marble mausoleum at Rose Hill Cemetery in Royston, Ulm, Georgia, the small northeastern Georgia town where he was raised and where he remained rooted despite a career that took him far from those hills. The Detroit Tigers outfielder, who finished with a .366 career batting average and 4,191 hits, was one of the most feared and widely despised men in baseball history. His brilliance on the field inseparable from the ferocity he carried into every room he entered. 3 people attended his funeral, a number as revealing as any statistic from his career. Christy Mathewson was buried after he died from tuberculosis in October 1925 at age 45, laid to rest at Lewisburg Cemetery in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, the disease tracing back to accidental exposure to poison gas during a World War I training exercise that damaged his lungs permanently and began the slow process that ended his life. The New York Giants pitcher who won 373 games and was among the first 5 players inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1936 is interred in a grave that marks the early end of one of the most complete careers in the sport's history. A man admired as much for his character as for his curveball. He spent his final years in a sanatorium at Saranac Lake, New York, his lungs never recovering from a war that had not even required him to fire a shot. Honus Wagner was buried after he died from a stroke in December 1955, at age 81, laid to rest at Jefferson Memorial Park in Pleasant Hills, Pennsylvania, roughly 9 miles outside Pittsburgh, the city where he played all but the earliest years of a career that produced 8 National League batting titles and a shortstop's range that no one who saw it ever forgot. The Flying Dutchman, who won the batting title 6 times in a row between 1906 and 1911, rests beneath a flat marker set close to a cemetery road, modest enough that first-time visitors sometimes walk past it. A headstone that bears no trace of the fact that his T206 tobacco card sold at auction for more than $6 million. He was among the 5 players elected in the first Hall of Fame class in 1936, alongside Ruth, Mathewson, Johnson, and Cobb, the 5 men who defined what the game had been before any of them arrived. Walter Johnson was buried after he died in December 1946 at age 59 from a brain tumor first diagnosed earlier that year, laid to rest beside his wife Hazel at Union Cemetery in Rockville, Maryland, a small cemetery in the Washington suburb where he had lived through his years with the Senators and to which he had returned in retirement. The pitcher who won 417 games and struck out 3,509 batters across a career spent entirely with a franchise that rarely gave him enough support to win. consistently is interred beneath one of the most unassuming markers belonging to any player of his stature, a flat stone in a quiet Maryland churchyard with no monument to speak of. He spent 21 seasons throwing the hardest fastball anyone had seen for a team that finished last or near it more years than not, and he remained gracious about it until the end. Jackie Robinson was buried after he died from heart disease and diabetes in October 1972 at age 53, laid to rest at Cypress Hills Cemetery in Brooklyn, New York, and in the borough where he had broken baseball's color barrier 25 years earlier, wearing a Dodger uniform that would become the most symbolically charged garment in American sports history. The second baseman, who endured 2 years of institutionalized racial abuse and emerged with his dignity intact and his statistics unassailable, is interred in a family plot that draws visitors year-round, leaving baseballs and flowers at a grave that functions as much as a civil rights landmark as a baseball memorial. His number 42 was retired across all of Major League Baseball in 1997, the only player ever so honored league-wide, ensuring his presence in every stadium for as long as the game is played. Roberto Clemente has no grave. He died on December 31st, 1972, at age 38. When the cargo plane he had personally chartered to deliver earthquake relief supplies to Nicaragua crashed into the Atlantic Ocean shortly after takeoff from San Juan, Puerto Rico. His body never recovered, despite search operations that continued for days across the waters north of the island. The Pittsburgh Pirates right fielder, who had accumulated exactly 3,000 career hits, ended his life carrying canned goods and medicine rather than a bat, a fact that baseball honored by waiving the standard 5-year waiting period and inducting him into the Hall of Fame in a special election held within months of his death. The Roberto Clemente Award has been given annually since 1971 to the player who best combines excellence with community service, and his name has been spoken in every dugout in every season since. And Ted Williams died in July 2002 at age 83 in Citrus County, Florida, and does not rest in any cemetery. 2 of his 3 children, acting on a note of disputed authenticity, authorized the transport of his body to the Alcor Life Extension Foundation in Scottsdale, Arizona, a cryonics facility where his remains were placed in liquid nitrogen suspension within hours of his death, and where they remain today, stored in a steel cylinder in an industrial park. The last man to hit above .400 in the major leagues spent 33 years as a Marine fighter pilot and a baseball hitter of extraordinary discipline, and his eldest daughter, Bobby Jo Farrell, spent the final years of her own life fighting unsuccessfully in court to have him cremated and scattered at sea, as she maintained his verified will had requested. There is no grave to visit. His head and body are stored separately. Hank Aaron was buried after he died on January 22nd, 2021, at age 86, laid to rest at Southview Cemetery in Atlanta, Georgia. The historic 125-acre cemetery, founded in 1886 by 6 formerly enslaved men, the oldest African-American cemetery in Greater Atlanta. The right fielder who broke Babe Ruth's home run record on April 8, 1974, with his 715th home run, and finished with 755, receiving death threats throughout the chase and reading every letter personally, rests alongside civil rights figures including John Lewis, Julian Bond, and Martin Luther King, Sr., in a burial ground that honors his life not merely as a baseball achievement, but as a life lived with sustained dignity against sustained hostility. His funeral procession drove past the former site of Atlanta Fulton County Stadium, and where the arc of his career had been played out. Mickey Mantle was buried after he died from liver cancer in August 1995 at age 63, interred in a mausoleum at Sparkman Hillcrest Memorial Park in Dallas, Texas, where he had lived since retirement. The plaque on his crypt describing him simply as the most popular baseball player of his era. The New York Yankees center fielder, who won the Triple Crown in 1956 and hit 536 career home runs, had played his entire career on damaged knees, injured in the 1951 World Series, fighting through pain that would have ended most careers in the first decade, and spent the years after baseball fighting the alcoholism that had shadowed his playing days and eventually destroyed his liver. He received a controversial transplant at Baylor University Medical Center 2 months before his death, sparking a national debate about organ allocation that outlasted the summer of his dying. Yogi Berra was buried after he died on September 22, 2015, at age 90, laid to rest at Gate of Heaven Cemetery in East Hanover, Morris County, New Jersey, a Catholic cemetery in the northern New Jersey hills, where his teammate and lifelong counterpart Billy Martin is also buried. The New York Yankees catcher, who won 10 World Series championships as a player, a number no one in the history of the sport has approached, was a 3-time American League Most Valuable Player, caught Don Larsen's perfect game in the 1956 World Series, and became as famous for the aphorisms that carried his name as for the career that earned him the right to be remembered in the first place. He managed both the Yankees and the Mets to pennants. Knockel was relieved of both jobs in ways that seemed unfair at the time, and remained one of the most beloved figures the game has ever produced until the last day of his 90 years. Josh Gibson was buried after he died from a stroke on January 20th, 1947, at age 35, laid to rest at Allegheny Cemetery in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a 300-acre Victorian cemetery along the Allegheny River that had been receiving Pittsburgh's notable dead since 1844. The catcher who played for the Homestead Grays and Pittsburgh Crawfords and was estimated to have hit somewhere between 800 and 900 home runs, the records kept inconsistently, often not at all, died just 3 months before Jackie Robinson broke the major league color barrier, never having received the opportunity that his talent so plainly demanded. The Baseball Hall of Fame inducted him in 1972, named 25 years after his death, and his grave in Allegheny Cemetery went unmarked for years before a proper monument was finally placed. Satchel Paige was buried after he died from a heart attack on June 8, 1982, at age 75, laid to rest at Forest Hill Cemetery in Kansas City, Missouri, the city where he had spent his final decades and where the Kansas City Monarchs, the Negro League franchise that anchored his career for years, had made their home. The pitcher who played professional baseball from 1926 until 1965, a documented span of nearly 4 decades, became the oldest rookie in Major League history when the Cleveland Indians signed him in 1948 at an age officially listed as 42. That though Paige himself was never entirely certain of his own birth date and treated the question with the philosophical detachment of a man who had more important things to think about. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1971, his plaque placed in the main gallery after initial plans to route Negro League inductees to a separate wing were abandoned following public outcry. Cy Young was buried after he died on November 4, 1955, at age 88 from heart failure, laid to rest at Pioli Cemetery in Pioli, Ohio, a small rural churchyard in Tuscarawas County on the farmland where he had been born, raised, and to which he had returned after baseball was done with him. The pitcher who won 511 games across 22 seasons, a total so unreachable by any subsequent pitcher that the annual award given to each league's best pitcher was named for him in 1956, the year after his death, and has carried his name at every award ceremony since. Rests in a cemetery that draws no tours and posts no visiting hours. A quiet corner of the Ohio countryside that holds the man whose name is spoken more often than almost any other in the game. The grave has no excess about it, which seems appropriate for a man from those hills. Rogers Hornsby was buried after he died from a heart attack in January 1963 at age 66, laid to rest in Hornsby Bend Cemetery in Austin, Texas, and a small historic cemetery near the Colorado River community that had been settled by his ancestors and still carried the family name into the era of his death. The St. Louis Cardinals' second baseman, who batted .424 in 1924, the highest single-season average in the history of the modern game, and won 6 consecutive batting titles from 1920 through 1925, rests far from the cities where he was simultaneously celebrated and despised in the Texas landscape that had formed whatever made him simultaneously so gifted and so difficult to spend time with. He was considered among the 3 or 4 greatest right-handed hitters who ever lived and among the most disagreeable men baseball has ever employed, and he seemed to regard both characterizations as equally accurate. Warren Spahn was buried after he died on November 24, 2003, at age 82, from natural causes, laid to rest at Elmwood Cemetery in Hartshorn, Pittsburgh County, Oklahoma, the small southeastern Oklahoma town, where he had made his home after retiring from baseball. the Boston and Milwaukee Braves left-hander who won 363 games, the most by any left-handed pitcher in Major League history. Threw his first game in the major leagues at 25, not because he lacked ability, but because he had spent 3 years in the United States Army, serving in combat at the Battle of the Bulge and at Remagen, where he was wounded and received a battlefield commission and the Bronze Star. He said the war made everything else in life feel manageable by comparison, and he went on to pitch in the major leagues until he was 44 years old. Thurman Munson was buried after he died on August 2nd, 1979, at age 32. And when his Cessna Citation jet clipped a tree line short of the runway at Akron-Canton Airport while he was practicing takeoffs and landings on an off day, the catcher having flown himself to Canton to spend time with his family before the team's next series. The New York Yankees catcher and captain, the first Yankee given that designation since Lou Gehrig, is interred at Sunset Hills Burial Park in Canton, Ohio, his hometown, the grave becoming a permanent memorial to a career ended in its prime, at a moment when he had been privately discussing retirement at the season's end to spend more time with his children. He was 7 times an All-Star, the 1976 American League Most Valuable Player, and the kind of catcher that pitchers still invoke when they are trying to describe what they want standing behind the plate. Catfish Hunter was buried after he died from amyotrophic lateral sclerosis on September 9, 1999, at age 53, laid to rest at the Mount Zion Missionary Baptist Church Cemetery in Hartford, Perquimans County, North Carolina, the small northeastern North Carolina town where he had been raised on a tobacco farm and to which he returned after baseball without hesitation. The Oakland Athletics and New York Yankees pitcher, who won 5 World Series rings and became one of the first stars of baseball's free agent era, rests beneath a simple stone in a rural churchyard that carries none of the fanfare of the cities where he once pitched, a marker that tells you exactly who he always believed himself to be, a farmer from Hartford who happened to be one of the best pitchers of his generation. He was diagnosed with ALS in 1998, told his family, and they told almost no one else, and died the following September. Don Drysdale was buried after he died from a heart attack in July 1993 at age 56 in his Montreal hotel room, where he had been working road games as a broadcaster for the Los Angeles Dodgers, laid to rest at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in the Hollywood Hills section of Los Angeles. The Dodgers right-hander who teamed with Sandy Koufax to form the most feared pitching combination of the 1960s and who set a record in 1968, by throwing 58 2/3 consecutive scoreless innings, is interred in a cemetery that also holds Buster Keaton, Liberace, and the remains of a substantial portion of the entertainment industry he had moved into after retiring from the mound. He was a 6-time All-Star, the 1962 Cy Young Award winner, and one of those pitchers whose reputation for brushing back hitters was not a reputation so much as an accurate description of his operating philosophy. Tony Gwynn was buried after he died on June 16, 2014, at age 54, from salivary gland cancer that he publicly and specifically attributed to decades of using smokeless tobacco, laid to rest at El Camino Memorial Park in San Diego, California, the city to which he had remained committed for his entire major league career with the Padres. The right fielder who won 8 National League batting titles and never hit below .317 in any full season after his rookie year produced a consistency of contact that statisticians and opposing pitchers found equally disorienting. A career .338 hitter who faced the best pitching in the world for 20 seasons and simply never stopped making contact. Then he had turned down money to leave San Diego, stayed to coach at San Diego State University, and chose to spend every year of his adult life in the city that first received him, a loyalty that the city returned without reservation. Kirby Puckett was cremated after he died on March 6, 2006, at age 45, from complications following a massive stroke, his ashes scattered without a public interment site ever established. The Minnesota Twins center fielder, who anchored 2 World Series championships and delivered the most complete single-game performance in the 1991 Fall Classic, a game-saving catch in the 3rd inning and a walk-off home run in the 11th, had been forced from the game at 35 by the sudden and irreversible onset of glaucoma in his right eye, losing in a matter of weeks the vision that had made him one of the most dangerous hitters of his era. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2001, the youngest player elected at that time, and he died 10 years after his retirement, still only 45 years old. Lou Brock was buried after he died on September 6, 2020, at age 81, from lymphoma, interred at Jefferson Barracks National Cemetery in St. Louis, Missouri, the federal veterans cemetery on the Mississippi River, whose grounds date to the Civil War era, and which serves as a final resting place for Missouri figures of national significance. The St. Louis Cardinals left fielder who stole 938 career bases and held the all-time stolen base record for nearly 2 decades, is interred in one of the most historically weighted burial grounds in the country, or a national cemetery that connects his name to the long American tradition of public service and sacrifice that Jefferson Barracks was built to honor. He came to the Cardinals in a 1964 trade from the Chicago Cubs that Cardinals fans have considered the most lopsided transaction in their franchise history for 60 years running. Ralph Kiner was buried after he died on February 6, 2014, at age 91, laid to rest at Green Lawn Cemetery in Farmington, New Mexico, the northwestern New Mexico city he had designated as his burial place. But the Pittsburgh Pirates slugger, who led the National League in home runs in each of his first 7 major league seasons, a streak of consecutive home run titles that no player before or since has come near, rests in a desert cemetery far from the Pittsburgh steel town that had known him as its most dangerous hitter in the late 1940s, and equally far from New York, where he spent decades as the voice of Mets baseball, and became as familiar to a generation of fans for his commentary and his malapropisms as for the home runs he hit when they were too young to have watched him hit them. His playing career ended early due to back injuries. He lived to 91. Hack Wilson was buried after he died on November 23, 1948, at age 48, from pulmonary edema following years of severe alcoholism, laid to rest at Holy Sepulchre Cemetery in Alsip. In Illinois, the South Suburban Chicago Cemetery, where his grave went unmarked for more than 3 decades before the Baseball Hall of Fame, upon inducting him in 1979, provided a headstone for a man who had died with $30 to his name in a Baltimore hospital charity ward. The Chicago Cubs outfielder, who drove in 191 runs in 1930, a single-season record that has stood unbroken for nearly a century, was one of the most feared hitters in the National League at the end of the 1920s, and was reduced to poverty and anonymity by the same appetites that had made him such compelling company in the years of his greatness. His unmarked grave in Alsip lay forgotten for 31 years, which is longer than his career lasted, and roughly half as long as his record has stood. Bob Gibson was buried after he died on October 2nd, 2021, at age 84, from pancreatic cancer, laid to rest at Mount Ida Cemetery in Omaha, Nebraska, the city where he was born, raised, and to which he remained attached through every year of a career that took him to St. Louis and back again. The Cardinals' right-hander, who posted a 1.12 earned run average in 1968, the lowest in the live ball era, and who struck out 17 Detroit Tigers in Game 1 of that year's World Series rests in the Midwest city that formed the competitive disposition that opposing hitters described, consistently and without affection, as the most intimidating presence they ever faced on a mound. He won 2 Cy Young Awards, 2 World Series championships, and 9 Gold Gloves. And he treated every game as if losing it would constitute a personal failure that he was not prepared to accept. Now, Roy Campanella was buried after he died on June 26, 1993, at age 93, from heart failure, laid to rest at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California, having spent 35 of those 93 years in a wheelchair, following the January 1958 car accident on an icy Long Island road that left him paralyzed from the shoulders down and ended one of the most decorated catching careers in the sport's history at the age of 36. The Brooklyn Dodgers catcher, who won 3 National League Most Valuable Player awards in 5 seasons, spent those decades in the Dodgers organization coaching catchers from his chair. A presence that players who came through the system in the 1960s and 1970s consistently described as the most instructive influence of their development. He was 93 years old, which meant he had lived nearly 60 years, past the night the ice took everything he had built. Walter Alston was buried after he died from a heart attack on October 1st, 1984, at age 72, laid to rest at Dartown Cemetery in Dartown, Ohio, the tiny Butler County village of fewer than 200 people where he had been born and to which he returned every offseason throughout the 23 years he managed the Brooklyn and Los Angeles Dodgers. The manager who signed 23 consecutive one-year contracts with the Dodgers organization and won 4 World Series championships without the security of a multi-year deal is interred in a village churchyard that has no particular fame except for the man in it who quietly became one of the most successful managers in the history of the sport. He never managed a day on a long-term contract, and he never seemed to need one. Ernie Banks was buried after he died on January 23, 2015, at age 83 from a heart attack, laid to rest at Graceland Cemetery in Chicago, a nationally registered historic landmark cemetery on the city's north side that also holds Louis Sullivan, Potter Palmer, and a cross-section of the figures who built the city that built him. The Chicago Cubs first baseman and shortstop who won back-to-back National League Most Valuable Player awards in 1958 and 1959, while playing for a team that finished 5th and 6th in those seasons, rests in the city that gave him its entirety in exchange for a career he gave back entirely. A man who played 19 major league seasons without appearing in a postseason game and who said, with apparent and undefended sincerity, that it never diminished his love for the game by a single degree. "Let's play 2, he always said. He meant it every time. Addie Joss was buried after he died from tubercular meningitis on April 14, 1911, at age 31, laid to rest at Woodlawn Cemetery in Toledo, Ohio, the city where he had grown up and where he had become the most celebrated athlete in the region before dying 11 days after his 31st birthday at the peak of a career that stood among the finest in the American League. The Cleveland Indians pitcher, who threw a perfect game in 1908 against Ed Walsh in what many historians regard as the most significant single-game pitching performance of the deadball era, finished his career with a 1.89 earned run average, the second lowest in Major League history. Yes, and was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1978 under a special committee, ruling that waived the standard 10-year service requirement because he died before completing his 10th season. His grave in Toledo marks an end that came too early by every measure available. These 30 players represent not just baseball excellence, but the full weight of what the sport demands and takes. Careers built on relentless physical discipline, records that outlasted the men who set them, and resting places that range from grand monuments to ocean depths to steel cylinders in Arizona, each one the final coordinate of a life spent in pursuit of something that a grass field and a white ball could only partially contain.